All right. Hey, everybody. This is your good friend, Dr. David Proden from down here in the North Star Recording Studio. And it's been a while. It's been almost 2 months since the last Safety Doc podcast. So welcome back. Welcome back. Let me tell you what's been going on here the last couple of months with the show. So I took on a larger quantity of consulting work here for the fall. That will continue through the spring, kind of ending in the end of May. So it's taken up a lot of time, folks, really has. And part of the balance there is the sacrifice of the podcast fidelity as far as getting these episodes out. But today's going to be a good one. Want to also touch base here on an update. I taught a superintendent legal class this fall. So it's a class I teach every fall. I've been teaching part-time at the university level for, hey, it's Red Crusader. Welcome, Red. Welcome, Red. So yeah, I've been teaching for 17 years part-time as a university instructor. And this fall taught superintendent legal issues. You can imagine quite different than previous years because so much of it had to do with pandemic response. And one thing is for sure, schools really have no idea how to respond to this. At my state of Wisconsin, we have 421 school districts, over 2,200 buildings, school buildings, and once you include 4K and kindergarten community sites, it's about 3,000 buildings. There's no useful guidance at all from our Department of Public Instruction, from state organizations that districts pay huge sums of money to every year. They're really not, they're doing the OLE, kind of do it on your own. Here's something broad that applies to everybody and nobody at the same time. And attorneys are just, you're pretty much, you're pretty much on your own. Here are the risks. Here's the consequences. We don't know how this will play out in court. Just saw today that one district is preparing to litigate here in my state against its administration, and that would be a first. It's a smaller district because they're saying, hey, you haven't kept us safe during the coronavirus. Basically, you haven't updated your HVAC systems in your buildings and stuff like that. Which we're talking. I mean, how in the world do you do that in any school building, right? Hundreds of thousands of square feet. You can barely do that in a hospital outside of just a couple of rooms. So it's insane. It really is. So working with these new soups, they're really put in a tough position because, again, they're not getting any guidance from the state or from their organizations, legal. They're just doing the best they can. And one of the things they shared with me is they said, Dave, our school board members are getting nervous because they don't know if they're going to be litigated against. What happens if some people attend a sporting event and they test positive for COVID, and then there's contact tracing. It says, was it this sporting event at your school district? So is there some liability if somebody dies? Or, now at the college level, right, they're testing student athletes, Division I for enlarged heart afterwards. I'm just saying it's just absolutely crazy. And then 1 week schools are online, next week they're offline, all of that stuff. So today I'm going to be talking about something called regression to the mean, or regression toward the mean. So I'm going to get into this in depth, and stick with me. Or, if it's getting to be late where you're at, bookmark this and come back to it. But we're going to talk about regression to the mean. And right now we're at a very unusual period of time with regression to the mean, which basically means things in time return to average. So if I'm out there playing baseball, right, and, for a couple of weeks, I'm going bananas, hitting home runs and triples and stuff like that, and my batting average is like 700. Well, it's going to return back to the mean, or it's going to regress back to like an average, like 300 or something like that. So we know this, that things tend to always return to kind of a mean. But it's actually not happening right now. So I'm going to get into that, what that means, and the fact that I'm saying it's not happening right now. It actually is happening right now. It's just we're looking at too small of a window. We need to think of terms of like years for kind of life to return to some kind of mean. And so yeah, it's really fascinating. I'm going to bring up a few kind of graphs and some visuals. We'll look at that. So if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do. We're gradually increasing subscribership. Hit the like. I appreciate that. I am dedicated to this channel. 249 episodes out there. School and community safety. A lot of terrific interviews. Had Larry Lawton on earlier in summer. The biggest jewel thief in America, ex-jewel thief now. But yeah, Larry was on the show, so you can just track back and find a lot of really fascinating episodes that have to do with like face validity, how people responded under stressful situations. Katie Pichon and the Cajun Navy, just some great shows going back, and there'll be great shows on deck too. So yeah, if you can hit that subscribe and like, I would appreciate that. So wanted to give a shout out today to one of my friends, Joe Dolio, from the great state of Michigan, right? Well, I guess depending upon how we describe great. But yeah, Joe Dolio over in Michigan. Let's take a look right now. He has the website tacticalwisdom.com. So I'm going to share screen and bring up a post that he made today. So he made this post, observing your surroundings. Again, tactical-wisdom.com. Observing your surroundings. He talks about normalcy bias, and it's described here as normalcy bias refers to an attitude that is entered when facing a disaster. People with the normalcy bias have difficulties reacting to something they have not experienced before. They also tend to interpret warnings in most optimistic way, possibly seizing on ambiguities to infer a less serious situation. So basically, they don't realize things are as bad as they are. And Joe wrote a brilliant post about that today. And he also said, you got to start looking more at what is happening around you. You have to do face validity, right? I talked about that many times in shows back in March and April when I was getting out and I was going to places like the Armory, the grocery store, the bank, the hospital, what's actually happening. So Joe went out and he was taking pictures. For example, this is the Walmart gun department. He took this picture today in Michigan. In a Walmart near him. And as he's indicating, this is extremely unusual, right? Walmart did say they were going to clear off their guns and ammunition. And that's what they've done. They've taken this, and he said there was, local security guard there to patrol vehicles. I mean, very visible that they were clearing this out. This wasn't something covert that was happening when the store was closed, being put into, you could put this right into a Walmart truck that is parked for unloading. You could have put this in unmarked pallets and loaded it back onto trucks. So these things, Joe's pointing this out. This is very concerning, right? This is a significant observation that right now in hunting season, when Walmart is making a lot of money off the sale of ammunition and guns, it's gone. It's gone. And the reason it's gone, and Walmart has stated the reason it's gone, is, they don't want people breaking into their stores, looting their stores after the election and getting their hands on these weapons. So that's really significant if we think about that. And I'm bringing this up now. One is, this is an excellent post. All of Joe's posts are of this caliber, no pun intended, right? But this also has to do with regression to the mean. Meaning we're pretty far from that right now. We have no idea when that's going to happen, when we're going to return to some normalcy or average, because we continue each day to go further and further from that in this trajectory out into the zone, which basically is known as failure to regress to the mean. We're not bouncing back. If this was a hurricane, we would have a couple of weeks, things would be pretty wonky after a hurricane, people, cleaning off streets and debris and whatever. And pretty soon, stores would be stocked again and things would kind of be bouncing back for the most part. But again, we're in this prolonged state right now, really since about the middle of March. And it's only getting stranger, and we're only getting further away from what this mean is. So over time, statistically, we will return to some kind of mean, but it could be years before we return to mean. And if we think of things, we have to think of things not in terms of like 1 year, 5 years, but 100 years or 500 years or 1,000 years of society. So this is really weird for people right now to try to figure this out, though, right? So they haven't had this happen in their lifetime. They're seeing this happen right now, everybody, first of all, there is no such thing as normal or similar, or there is no such thing as normal. We have things that are similarity, right? Today, we expect to be similar to yesterday, tomorrow similar to today, stuff like that. But there is no such thing as same, or I guess as kind of normal. But anyway, look at this picture here. Walmart clearing stuff off very overtly. Things are being, cleared out. And then Joe also took this picture, and it is a energy complex. So, that's providing your electricity and stuff. And they're putting up, first of all, they have putting up more security, lights facing outwards, bright lights, facing outwards. Or, he's saying it's an anomaly. Like, why would you do that, right? Unless you're really expecting things to really go to hell. So, this is happening, having more security toward these types of places. I had a friend on 9/11. I had a friend, Phil. And when 9/11 happened, that night, so this is in Wisconsin, he went, took his hunting rifle, and about a quarter mile from his house was an electrical substation, kind of out in the middle of nowhere. And he went and he camped out there the entire night. And I wrote about it in School of Errors. So, by the way, ouch, man. School of Errors, Rethinking School Safety in America, hard copy. Check it out, Amazon. So, really a good book about chaos engineering, chaos thinking makes even more sense right now. So, but yeah, so my friend Phil, is out there and wrote about in the book, and so it seems kind of weird, right? But I mean, but he's saying we don't know what's happening. 9/11, information's coming in is real chaotic for this velocity of information. Are there going to be more attacks? Are there going to be attacks on the power grid, stuff like that, as domestic terrorism? So he's out there protecting this grid in the middle of nowhere. Of course, there wasn't anything, but it's different now, right? Because we do know that there have been substantial riots. There's ongoing riots. It doesn't take much to trigger a riot. And so, we're looking at what's happening right now in Philadelphia. Imagine in the next week what happens as a result of the election. And now it's more organized. It's not going to be just storefronts and looting and statues. There will be attempts to go after power grids, to go after water supplies, water towers. All of that is pretty much open, for as prime targets right now for civil unrest. People are going to be very angry. And again, I think as Joe is indicating, we have very overt signs right here, very overt signs. So let me go over to the chat. So first of all, hey Sass, good evening. Mictobus, good evening. Todd Warrior, thanks. Hey, thanks. I haven't seen you in the chat before, so thanks for coming over here. Of course, Red, keeping things level in the great state of Ohio, our good friend Red. Juan, San Francisco, appreciate I had Juan as a guest on the show. Just always appreciate the work that he does as a photographer to really document what is happening, life on the streets in San Francisco. He's a really, really sharp guy. And then he's always finding the cars that still have the powerful V6s and V8s and bringing those back to life. So it's a good guy. Mictobus, thanks for the shout out with School of Errors. And School of Errors really it's as relevant today in just safety, embracing safety, embracing chaos situation. So one of the things when I was writing School of Errors, so I wrote about 9/11. I had a contact with the City of New York Department of Planning. And was able to get a lot of information. But there was something I didn't write in the book, which I'm going to mention right now. So in 9/11, right, there were hundreds of people who stayed at their computers in the Twin Towers after the towers had been struck. And they stayed there to save files, right? They're saving their files and stuff instead of getting the hell out of the building. They're saving these files. And part of the reason, though, is it goes back to what Joe wrote about here, and it's normalcy bias. People want things to return to normal. They don't want to accept the fact that our building was just hit by a plane. So they override. They take their brains and they go into this override mode. And it's just absolutely crazy. So you had hundreds of people stayed and did this stuff for several minutes. Some of them got out and some of them didn't. But here's something that happened after that. So some of the survivors formed a group, and they would go around and they would meet with people who worked in high-rise buildings, and they would do presentations. And this is like in 2005 and 2010, and they would say, here's what to do if you're in a building and there's ever gets hit by a plane or there's some attack or something like that. So they felt compelled to go around, even though 9/11, this kind of black swan event at the time, and to tell people you have to recognize chaos the moment of onset and act. That was their main message, right? So you didn't hear a lot about this group. I mean, I found them through work that I was doing and things like that, and they faded out over time, right? It's hard to keep a group like that together, but that was their message. That was their message of saying, you have to recognize the signs of chaos. So what do we see over here on the screen? Like, we see the pictures of Joe, shares from, the Walmart, the weapons being taken out of Walmart, that have been there forever during the sales season. Again, in the way that this is done, the way that this is being done, police cars out in front, security. I mean, there's a very overt message, right? That this is sending. You could have done this at midnight. This could have all been into crates, could have been back onto a Walmart vehicle. There could have been some escort with the vehicle of an unmarked, security, whatever. But that didn't happen. So why didn't that happen? Why was this so overt and these things going on? So it's really frightening. Well, I should say, I mean, it's frightening to people who are tuning into it. Other people are just going about their day and they're not realizing what is happening, these significant levels of change which are happening, this anticipation. So, I know people in my state capital who've said, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of areas where anything that, of value has been secured into off-site locations, that they are anticipating, again, substantial riots, substantial looting. And I think it'll be some greater than what we've seen. It's been demonstrated what people can do, what the reaction of the police will be with the National Guard. I just think we are in for a substantial week of change, and then how long that persists, I don't know. I can't imagine where things will go from there. But as Joe said, watch and see what is happening around you. So looking, Sass Too Many wrote, the Overton window is always in lay. Yeah. So the Overton window is what is acceptable politically at any time, right? So with school safety, where my area of expertise is one of my areas, right? But school safety, if there is a Sentinel school shooting event, the Overton window changes. So, maybe there would be, more legislation on gun restriction following a Sentinel school safety event, things that you wouldn't have thought possible prior to that Sentinel event. So yeah, the Overton window significantly is impacted by what's happening, what kind of legislation gets proposed, what gets approved. 9/11 was a big shift on the Overton window. For example, legislation, what people were willing to give up in order to maintain flying. Take your shoes off in an airport, have a small bottle of shampoo and stuff like that. It's just also shifted the social contract, but yeah, absolutely wild. So Bacon, welcome from Inglewood, our good friend Bacon Maldito. So yeah, I think, as McTavis, I think as you indicated, we're going to have serious unrest. And the thing is, like, we're very close to it right now, right? We're just days away, and it doesn't seem that people are recognizing just how close we are to what I would say would be the Sentinel event of my lifetime. It could very well be that we see disruption of deliveries, postal power, that there would be attacks on different grids. I mean, who knows what's out there being funded for deep fakes, right? I talked about that on my PBS presentation back in 2019, and that the first hearing in Congress on responding and preventing deep fakes was like in 2018 or something. I mean, it's like, it's just crazy and how much money is being put into this. But so yeah, but anyway, thanks to Joe Dolio for that post today. I want to share a couple books. One is Concrete Jungle by Clay Martin. So I ordered Clay's new book, Prairie Fire, from Amazon. It's like $11. Concrete Jungle is well worth the money. It's also in that range. This came out earlier this year, so I think February, March, and it seems like it was written like in April, and it was so prophetic of what was likely to happen with coronavirus. And I talked to Clay, it was a guest on the show. I wrote this a year ago, but just it came out this spring. It's a terrific read. Prairie Fire is the next step to this. But Concrete Jungle, there again, so much in here of value. But one of the things, I just repeat back to people. They'll say like, well, what are some things that stick out of Concrete Jungle? So Clay Martin, respected career in the military, working on survival intelligence, but I said one of the things that stuck out from the book, Clay said, hey, do you want to advertise your affiliations? I mean, do you really want to put a bumper sticker on your truck, which indicates, politically where you lean, or even sports team where you lean, sports ball, whatever, or in your lawn or things like this? And the fact was, he's writing about this not from a position of being afraid to express, I guess, your First Amendment right, but the thing is, you don't know how someone's going to interpret this, right? You don't know if someone is going to be unhinged because they see something which they perceive as offending them, or some group they're affiliated with, and suddenly they've damaged your vehicle and your $500 deductible is gone because you've got a new paint job you've got to work on, or your house gets damaged or spray painted because of some sign. So, it's advice like that comes out of steps to take and say, we are in this point right now where the best, first, the best consideration is to keep yourself off of the radar, right? And the second is recognize when you're in extreme situations and how to extricate yourself the hell out of there, or if you have to defend yourself. So, I mean, it's not a book about retreating. It's a book about wisdom. So, my other recommended book here is Thinking Fast and Then Slow with Daniel Kahneman. Now, this is a thick read, man. So, this book actually, and if you just freeze the screen here, Thinking Fast and Slow, this came out maybe about 10 years ago. Talks about how people process information. And it's great. It has so many stories, so many research stories. So you can find this actually on YouTube, and as an audiobook, just download it. It's free on YouTube. But I've listened to it a couple times on long drives, like I said, going to the university, stuff like that. And it's so, some of the examples, he's always talking about kind of the first brain and the second brain of, people, if they just take things without thinking of it, versus then the second brain of processing information, a little deeper. For example, a question, if he poses like, true or false, or, Moses led the animals on the ark. So, like, I'll just pause. You can respond to that in the chat. So Moses, led the animals on the ark. So his, the findings on that. I see Bacon. Bacon's like, yes. So, so the findings on that, most people initially say, well, yeah, because it's a priming. It's Moses. They know the ark, that the animals went on the ark. but it wasn't Moses, right? It was Noah who led the animals on the ark. So, but there's so many examples in that book. Wow, it's pretty crazy stuff. So I'm going to be working over here on my split screen, getting stuff ready here. So let me bring this one up. So share screen. All right. Okay. So this is basically an example of kind of a regression to the means. So reported happiness as a function of income. So, one of these things is, we know people that don't have a lot of money kind of, if you're making $20,000, you're reporting a 2 out of 10 on a happiness score. And the more money you make, kind of the more this correlates, right? Or there's a relationship here. There's the happier you are up to a certain point. So this is basically what a regression line looks like. And then, you draw this through points. And so we can also take, like, the stock market has a regression line, batting averages have a regression line, things like that. But I don't want to get too complex into that right now. But we're basically saying that things regress to the mean. So let's talk about the Sports Illustrated Jinx. Okay, Sports Illustrated Jinx. So of course, the Jinx is, if you're on the cover of Sports Illustrated, then the next year you're going to tank. You suck. So, and a lot of times that is true, but it's true because, right? Let's think about this. You make the cover of Sports Illustrated because you had a phenomenal year as an athlete, and statistically, you will regress to the mean. It's unlikely that you will repeat that performance or that you'll do better than that. The statistical likelihood is you'll fall back to more of a typical performance. So that happens. That's not because of a jinx or a hoax or anything like that. It just means, it's unlikely you're going to repeat the performance that you had from a statistical standpoint. It's just not going to happen. So looking over here in the chat, Bacon, I suppose I should start consolidating my writings into like a book or 3 when I get some time. So, yep, I'm working on also the velocity of information right now, and I need to crank that up into high gear. Bacon also wrote, Shut Your Trap is one of the most important martial arts in practice. And don't be there, jitsu, and deny engagement. Right. I remember that talking with a firearms instructor. He said, the first advice, right, is just don't be in a situation where you're likely to have a lot of things going on around you that you have no control over. Like, so for example, if it's riots and these protests that tend to go pretty violent, don't go there. I mean, don't drive down to these or to these communities or these places where these things are happening. It's like Joe Dolio said. I mean, it's not hard to find out where the stuff is being planned. You can find that online, but people who just want to go and observe suddenly find themselves being there and participating. Or being brought into it, or their cars are surrounded in some area, and then what do you do? I mean, it's absolutely just crazy. But so yeah. Sass wrote, Sports Illustrated sounds like 15 minutes of fame. So I had the privilege of having dinner with Aaron Clary and Chad Elkins, and which was kind of like a 15 minutes of fame. That was really, really a good time. And I was sharing with both of them that maybe about 15 years ago, we had a garage sale, and I had a number of these basketball trophies from a summer league that I participated in, a traveling league, not a semi-pro thing, just a kind of a traveling rec league type thing around the Midwest. So it wasn't like anybody got picked up into this league and made it to the NBA or anything like that. So I was doing that, from my late 20s to early 30s. It was fun. I mean, and so over time, you just get a lot of trophies from stuff like that. And I kept one. I've got it over here. One of the nicer ones, and the rest I'm like, I just don't need these anymore. I mean, I decided, what am I going to do with these? So I put them in a rummage sale, and some guy comes in and he's like, hey, I'll buy all of these. I'll buy every one of these, like for $1 or whatever. But I only buy them if your husband signs them. So she's like, okay, I'll set them aside. So I get home from work and she's like, hey, there's a guy who's going to stop back. He bought your trophies, but he wants you to sign him. I'm like, sign him? What the hell is that about? Why would anybody want me to sign, sign these trophies? I mean, it's just, there's no value that's going to be added to them. For me to sign like this wooden base of this trophy, and I have no fame of my own from playing in this league, but anyway, the guy comes back and he has the money, and he has a nice Sharpie, and he watches me sign each of these these trophies. So I don't know. I think I signed my name and then the date, and not a lot of room like on these trophies to sign on this wooden base. And he was thrilled, man. He was like, this is awesome. And I don't know who he was. No, I have no idea. I don't even know if he lives, in my community or anything like that. But yeah, so anyway, signed. That was my 15 minutes of fame. I shared in that story last night. I said, because, being the safety doc, there's a small niche of people who really get into the work that I do, who've read every article I've written, listened to every show, watch the PBS stuff. And I get people who will email me questions, about articles or a certain part of a show or something like that. And so it's pretty cool. But again, I'm trying to change, right now and say, the safety stuff, the school safety stuff is still there, but I'm really focusing more on the whole chaos engineering and trying to understand what's happening, and kind of become more of like a social chaos engineer, type expert. That's where I'm evolving to. So it's just kind of crazy, but yeah. So, hey, Mictobus, yeah, you saw that tweet. So, yeah, it was funny because, well, a few things from that. One, we had planned this for quite a while. It was, it was the crossing of schedules for all of us that allowed it to happen. So kept it pretty low key because just didn't know if it was going to, to actually happen or not. And we all live in different, states, and then I've never seen anybody eat as fast as Aaron Clary. So, I mean, I looked up, and from my meal, and he was done after I had like 2 bites in. So, yeah, I've never seen anybody eat that fast. But no, it was absolutely a great time. I appreciate, as having all of you, Sass, Mictobus, Red, we talked about it yesterday. We said it's intellectual discourse. There's so little of it out there that when it does happen, you take notice, and you kind of you just savor it, right? Because that's not what's happening now. It's all of the reality TV shows. People are saturated with social media, and it's just, you just don't have a good intellectual talk about a range of topics, and that's what we were able to enjoy over a tremendous dinner too. So yeah, it was really a good time. So I appreciate it that we were able to do that. So Bacon wrote, did the same, kept the trophies my school made, but took pics, tossed all my tournament ones. So I actually have trophies. I have trophies. I coached basketball, junior high basketball, for I think 6 years. And I was like 16 or 17 years old. I was 16. And I coached a middle school, a Catholic school boys basketball team. And this was back in like 1989, maybe 1990, a long time ago. And it was a regular league. I mean, they had Catholic schools from other cities, and pretty big stuff. The championship was played in like a high school gym. There were like 1,000 people that showed up for it. Someone came out and sang the national anthem, and it's really, back in that time, was kind of a thing. And I coached, and the 1 year we won first place. We were, I think, 18-5, and I have the trophy back there. Because I actually think the school was going to get rid of it. I recycled a lot of them. I took them to, I think it was Special Olympics for a while was accepting trophies. And so I had like a whole trunk load. We took it and said, here. And then, they would rebadge them and stuff like that. And then it was the school was cleaning out their trophy case and somehow got a hold of me and said, hey, like, we're either going to get rid of this, or if you want it, you can have it. So I took it. And at this point, I don't know, it seems like wrong to get rid of it. Although, I mean, like I said, the only thing is it's a dust collector. It's not easy to, those just, suck up dust. But so yeah, let's talk here about, the velocity of information and failure to regress to the mean. So I'm going to move us over here. So yeah, Sastro, the only trophies I ever got were scars. Yeah. Yeah. So it's pretty funny too, because, those trophies, even though they're from the 80s, I mean, they're still mostly all just plastic. It's not like the trophies from the 40s and 50s that were made out of, metal or brass or something. So I do have that one basketball trophy, which is really cool. I have a trophy over here too from high school bowling league. I was in. You're right. I mean, now that you're kind of bringing this up in the chat, I'm like, why the hell do I even have these things? I really need to clear out and get rid of them. So I'm gonna share screen, and I'm gonna bring this up. Okay, so you don't see me right now, but what you see is this diagram, the velocity of information, and I'll come back on screen here in a little bit. But I want you to look at this. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger here, so this will make sense. So this goes back March of 2020. So again, this is when everything was going down, right? We're hearing, oh, the NBA is closing. Like at halftime, they came out of the one game and they're like, hey, everybody has to go home. Disney shut down. Everything, just ground to a halt, and information was crazy, right? We were just hearing, oh, we have a shortage of ventilators. Hospitals will be overrun. That's the night of the 24-hour shopping. And, people were buying up pasta, toilet paper shelves were just cleared off. It was wild because nobody knew what was going on. So that was the onset of, basically where we're at right now, right? So that's the onset. Now, everything to the left of that over there, this return to Utopia on the left, you see it. As we remember before March, if you ask people, tell me about before March, I mean, they'll remember it as paradise, as absolutely the best time ever. Stock market was high, everything was in stock. And, we don't realize that, yeah, there were a lot of things that weren't great back then. I mean, it was a hell of a lot better, I guess, than it was now in a lot of ways. But everyone is going to have this false baseline of like how great things really were. But anyway, so we look at this. So take a look there in March. All right. So then we get down here at the bottom of March, onset of chaos. So chaos starts as a change from Taurus, meaning predictability. So what our days were like, that we could predict day-to-day similarity, that went out the window. We had no idea. We're hearing, oh, everyone, you're going to have to stay at home, safer at home orders. You can't do this. We're not sure you can travel state to state. The airlines might shut down, all of that. So this is this onset. Now, normalcy bias, right? What Joe Dolio talked about. People were either accepting this and saying, okay, this is a chaos. I've got to start covering my basis on that. I've got to start observing what's happening around me. I've got to get my supplies together. Or else people would just be like, this will blow over. This is just, people are overreacting and things like that. So those are the people who stay with normalcy bias. We still have some of those people out there today. And again, and then when I say this, it's the fact that you have to understand how other people and also the governments are reacting to this. So you might have stayed pretty steady throughout this, and congratulations if you did. But the fact is, you have to observe and acknowledge the behaviors which are happening. You have to observe that Walmart is having police, outside of their buildings and security while they're taking their rifles and ammunition out right now. I mean, you have to recognize the things that are overt. That the power company at their main stations are bringing in, secured vehicles, armored vehicles, and then also putting in additional lighting. So this whole thing down here on the left of cognitive dissonance, people get faced with either forced compliance, right? Hey, you have to wear a mask. You have to stay 6 feet apart. You can't travel. You have to have essential papers to travel. And then they get overwhelmed with new information. So this is when cognitively it gets really foggy for people. Now I'd say like a lot of you, like Sast and, Bacon and, Mictobus, Juan, so, for you observe this in people. You probably didn't experience this so much yourselves because, I mean, you're really deep thinkers, right? You look at things, you observe, you make decisions, but you probably saw this in a lot of people. You saw this behavior. So we get toward the end of March. So we talk about velocity of information. News media is just pouring stuff out there. We're hearing ventilators are going to shortage of ventilators, all people are going to be dying, hospitals overwhelmed, things be shut down. End of March, we started to get the emails, right? All of us got emails. Hey, hear from the company you bought from, and we're here to support you. And we know this is a hard time. And I'm like, what the hell? Thanks, WordPress. Thanks, Calvin Klein. I mean, just absolutely worthless stuff. Local news media started to go out and interview businesses. Oh, what are you going to do? And all of this stuff, instead of just like, rehashing what they're hearing from, the big news outlets. So that's happening in the end of March. Couple other things here. So pandemic, civil unrest, all of these new terms came in. I had a show with Bacon Maldito, and we talked about the pandemic lingo. So you can find that on safetyphd.com, pandemic lingo. And Bacon was keeping track of terms. And Bacon, you can send me up a new list if you want to expand it, because I haven't been tracking this as thoroughly as you have. And Sass, to me, you're right. It was all of this stuff over here. Where the companies were doing this, it's all virtue signaling, right? I mean, it's completely they don't care. But it's a narrative that they jump on. And yeah, just absolutely crazy. So this new vocabulary up above, those are 6 of the terms, but we know there are at least 15 or more. And from a linguist point of view, okay, so I have a degree as a speech language pathologist before I obtained my PhD. So I studied linguistics, and it's very, very uncommon, one, to have so many new vocabulary words in a year. So here's just 6: social distance, social worker, safer at home, flatten a curve, contact tracing, self-quarantine. And what happened is we got all of this new vocabulary, and we also had to learn what it meant, right? Like, what does safer at home mean? Is it a lockdown? Does it mean you can only go out an hour a day to, work out? What does this really mean? Or self-quarantine, like for how long? And can I still go out and get groceries? What is, people knew social distance. They kind of got that down as, okay, 6 foot, or you see these stupid signs, be 4 penguins apart. I'm like, I'll take the 6 feet. I don't know how wide a penguin is. So, but you have to take these and put them into your lexicon. In your lexicon, that's what you use every day. So that becomes part of your vocabulary. So a lot of this stuff, typically terms that we hear, they don't transfer to our lexicon. And how rare that is actually is, like, in 2017, the only word that really transferred into a lexicon was spaghetti map. And that was from southern US after hurricanes, Irma and Harvey came in, and they had those prediction maps. It basically looked like you dropped a whole bunch of spaghetti on top of Florida, and it'd be like, here's one way hurricane could go, here's another. So spaghetti map became a term that people knew. So if you heard a weather person talking about spaghetti map, you knew that it was just, okay, they're going to run 300 simulations, and this is where things are likely to go. And actually, both hurricanes didn't follow the path of the spaghetti map anyway. So anyway, so here we are. Let's take a look out. So we get to the end of March. Companies are sending us that stuff. We get to May, and we hit this thing called finite voltage. So finite voltage means, and this is kind of my term. I mean, this is my thing. Finite voltage. Now there are points in previous research studies, government studies. Dr. John Apple, military psychiatrist, that had a lot of information that kind of came into this, but looking at civilian studies of civilian breakdown, how people, they just lose it. Like, I just can't take it anymore. I mean, I'm just going crazy. They start making really horrible decisions. You know, they become violent with people. Their finances, you know, they might just sell everything that they have at a loss. They just start to panic. So that hits the civilian population in about 90 days. We're looking at May, June, July. You probably, again, you knew a lot of people that this happened to. So yeah, Bacon, Red, Sass, McTobis. You know, you know people that lost it, and they lost it before 90 days. If you're a kid, you know, some kids that, you know, why can't I go to the playground? So at the bottom here, this thing called time dilation, or I'm going to bring it up here, time dilation. So if you're a kid right now, and you know you're like 7, 8 years old, you don't really remember much before the time before there was all of this coronavirus stuff, all of the stuff where you couldn't be out on the playground, or you had to be one pool noodle away from somebody else. You know, again, you know, if you're 7, 8 years old, this is 10% of your life. I mean, if you're my age, this is, you know, 1.5 be 2% of my, I mean, it's small. So the younger you are, the bigger impact this has on you. So anyway, people start losing it. May, June, July. There's also this thing called wet bulb effect, right? Wet bulb effect basically means, so if you go outside as an athlete, I have to consider this when I go out biking. So wet bulb effect means, here's the deal. It is, you know, 97 degrees with, you know, almost 90% humidity, right? Just crazy. If I go outside biking on that day, I'm not going to be able to shed heat from my body, right? Because the environment is already saturated. The air is already heavy. It's hot. I'm not going to be able to sweat and cool down. It's not good for me. Probably die. So this basically kind of happens in a media and psychological perspective with people too. Everywhere they go, they see that, they go to Walmart, they see the arrows on the floor. You can only go this way. They see this signs 6 feet apart. They get notices, hey, your bank lobby is closed. You can't do this. Every news article, right? Every leading news article is about coronavirus in some capacity. So you can't get away from it. So it starts to overwhelm people unless they intentionally go in and tune it out. But a lot of people don't. They're just addicted to media, social media, things like that. So the wet bulb, May, June, July, really pushes people toward this finite voltage of just kind of, you know, they languish, anger, depression. You know, there's a lot of people. I mean, it's study internet searches right now, right? Keywords for depression treatment, stuff's through the roof. So we get this pandemic, civil unrest is happening. We're at about 100 days here, this finite voltage. Then get this, right? Then it gets really crazy. This is where we thought we'd kind of return to a normal, like in August, and it never happened. Things just got more wonky. We had more riots, and what people did is they surrounded themselves with comfort items. They're buying puzzles, video games, really, really hard to get. You start to see other things start to go very hard to find, in interior paint, freezers. People start to buy canning supplies. So when you hit this point, it's called crowd-in behavior. So finite voltage is one thing. It's like crossing the streams in Ghostbusters. You know, well, I'm fuzzy on the whole good bad thing. What happens when you cross the streams? Imagine every, you know, proton in your life, or molecule, reversing at the speed of light. Oh, good, bad. Okay, I got it. So basically, you have this crowd-in behavior that happened around August. People are buying, and we know this, like from the stores and things like that. I was able to get this information. You can see what people are doing when they hit crowd-in behavior, and stores shifted for this. They started to put in things that people that made people feel good, right? Like they were selling more things like pillows, and especially if they had them in stock. They were bringing out holiday things, especially overseas in Germany. In August, they were bringing out Christmas items that they normally wouldn't bring out until at least the end of October, because people were they wanted them, they wanted trinkets, they wanted stuff like that. But when you see this happen, crowd in behavior usually doesn't happen, because one, you have to get kind of beyond this 90 days. And when you see crowd in behavior, like World War II is a good example. The Great Depression is another good example. Interviewing people, many people, in the 1930s, reading through transcripts, and they would say, I don't think this will ever end. And for a lot of them, it went on for, 5-8 years, especially, up until the US had entered, World War II. But so, these people were just saying, I don't think this is going to end. So crowd in behavior indicates that people right now don't think they don't know when this will end. They have no definite endpoint to it. So they're saying, I'm going to make myself comfortable. So this whole thing of crossing the streams, when finite voltage happens, and then also crowd in behavior shoots up, and then the streams cross in July, it basically indicates a lot of people feel hopeless, so they're going to surround themselves with things that make them happy, and they're just going to become stagnant. And anything can set people off. They'll even kind of embrace situations that that might become very chaotic, in the chance that it brings back some normalcy for them. So it's really dangerous. Finite voltage and crowd and behavior. I can't stress enough that when these cross, this is very, very bad. So I'm going to just put me on the screen here for a little bit. So so when that finite voltage and crowd and behavior crosses, like in August, it's a really bad sign. So I interviewed Randy Travis, on the show. Not Randy Travis. Who the hell was it? Randy Travis is a singer, right? But we talked about God, what the hell is he's gonna I feel bad for this. I can't remember. I think it is Randy Travis, isn't it? It is. So I had him on my show. We talked about Robert Travis. Oh God, sorry, Robert. Sorry, man. He's a friend too, Robert. Okay, Robert Travis. Safety Doc podcast 145 back on August 3rd. So he was an Alaskan crab boat guy. So I'd say he did 122 days on a crab boat in 2007. Just crazy stuff, right? 60-foot swells, refrigerator-sized chunks of ice coming across the deck. If they hit people, take them out. And a most dangerous job, Bureau of Labor Statistics, most dangerous job you could have. So how the hell did you survive? And he's like, well, you knew it was going to end, right? There was an end to the season, and then you'd come back in. There was no extension, whatever. So if you got to 122 days, it was done. You got to go in. But we're not there right now. No one knows when this is going to end, or really has any hint. If anything, people expect right now that this is going to get substantially more wonky and more chaotic. So anyway, let's take a look over. So we're at this crowd and behavior. Now we're beyond this. So everything over here in the green, this is what is called failure to regress to the mean. So remember, if you have a Major League Baseball player, has 2 weeks and he hits like 10 home runs and it just goes crazy, batting like 700 for two weeks. At some point that player is going to regress to the mean. Statistically, it will happen. Like you will return back to a 300 batting average and whatever. You just don't defy statistics over time. But we're defying statistics over time right now. We are failing to regress to the mean or some similarity in society, right? That we're not having to wear masks, that we're not having to wake up in the morning and hear, oh, by the way, Walmart, our biggest retailer, is taking out all weapons right now in the next 48 hours because they anticipate that their stores could be broken into and looted during riots. We're moving further away from what is a normal, quote unquote, normal day that we would have experienced, basically like back in February and before that. So this failure to regress to the mean is where we're at right now. Now, when we look at this, 20, 30 years from now, this might only be like a 1 or 2 year thing. Might be, right? Maybe it's going to be like a 5-year thing, but it will be, there will be some mean that we will regress to. Now, the question is like, where will that be? What will we regress to? I don't have an idea, but I want to just, again, make that statement. This failure to regress to the mean is an area we haven't been in, since really the 30s. So none of us remember this. It's very unusual. We can't expect tomorrow to be like today. So Victibus says, I give it 5 more days personally. Yeah, this adds so much strain and stress to the situation that either it is just going to completely break, and then that will basically kind of end things, or we're going to be out in some weird satellite similarity area that we've never been in before. It's just nuts. So, yep, this is what people are doing. More learning skills. Canning will probably have another run on supplies. This terminology, crowd and behavior. So here's a few things, though. Again, Joe Dolio says it. Go out and observe things for yourself. Go out and watch, just like Joe did today. Well, he saw like what's happening at the Walmart. So you can say, I observed versus they said. Things you can do for your own life, especially if you have kids. I strongly suggest this, especially right now. I think you need to, change things up every 30 days very overtly. And I say that based upon research studies on civilian populations, especially back in World War II, but also dating back, to the Great Depression, that, every 30 days with your family, now, hey, we're going to, if it's spring or something, whatever, we're going to be focusing on planting a garden or composting, or learning some skills, or learning like some new game. Some of this can be skills based, whatever. We're going to 30 days. We're going to learn some situational awareness stuff. We're going to be making maps of our yard or apartment complex, or some things in our city, or whatever it is. But if you do that, it gives people this artificial sense, kind of, that they are moving back to a similarity. It works for quite a while. Governments have done this. They've done it successfully in World War II. It's harder today with people having access to social media and stuff. So, hey, Sir Brian Bowden is in. Brian was a guest last night on Masculine Geek podcast, the Jersey Devil. So, Brian, I did not listen to it in real time. I was at another event, but they're fortunate to have you on. So, yeah. So, Bacon, or Brian was writing, and Brian is in the Bronx in New York. You better get your supplies now. It's going to hit the fan soon. And I think so. I think I've been ramping up, our frequency of shopping, and, we already had some items, but I think we're in for something much more substantial than what we've seen before. And especially now we understand what the police response and government response will be to riots. In a lot of areas, it was largely a stand down or sacrificing certain areas of a town. And so now, once that, that people know that that's going to be the likely response, I anticipate we're going to see a very substantial disruption through violent events. I wouldn't, again, be surprised to see attacks on, electrical substations. Joe did post pictures where they're starting to fortify those in his area. So also, embrace crowd in, just in this green part on the bottom here, number 3. It's okay. Get some things around you that make you feel good right now. Number 4, Parkinson's Law. And I talked with Chad Elkins about this. He's observing it quite a bit with some of his clients. Chad's a CPA also, works with people taxes, things like that. But anyway, Chad was talking about people who are saying, hey, I'm working like all the time now, since I'm working from home. And this thing called Parkinson's law basically means people need a start time and an end time to their work day, or even their regular day, if you're retired or something like that. So when people abruptly they've gone to an office or something for 15 years and suddenly they're working from home, what they were doing, Parkinson's law, for example, at virtual reality in Chicago, this place that started up, that was doing like virtual reality gaming. They were shut down by the city that they couldn't do virtual reality gaming. But then when they were able to reopen, I interviewed Aaron, the owner. They were selling space. These basically, they had kind of these cubes already for people to come in and do this virtual reality stuff. They were selling those because people wanted work areas. They're like, I want some place I can go in the morning. I have good Wi-Fi and there's like air conditioning, and then I can like come home at night. So he rents these spaces out, and the business is doing better. Like there's more people doing that. So anyway, here's just a bigger picture kind of this failure to regress to the mean. It's on the right side of this whole thing called Philosophy of Information, which is the title of the book that I'm writing. And just you can see, again, once we got finite voltage, that's really critical to understand. It's about at 90 days, a lot of people start to lose it. Typically, we kind of get back to something that's normal. Imagine like if this was a hurricane or as a volcano or whatever it is, even 9/11, right after 3 months, we returned to a higher level of similarity, far greater than what we have now. I mean, for example, we weren't anticipating a month after 9/11 that we would have additional, plane attacks on the U.S. and things like that. But right now, our baseline, what's happening every single day, is different, right? I mean, we wake up and it's like you can't go, you can't get a gun at Walmart, right now, and the more restrictions coming out, and you can't have so many, these people together. What was it I just read with Great Britain, where they're banning Christmas gatherings, and they will enforce it by going into your house if they suspect that you're having a Christmas gathering. And Nikolai Razvayu was on the show, and he lives in Australia now. You might remember him as the Russian cyclist, national cyclist, back in the 80s. And he was biking, 62 miles away from Chernobyl right after the nuclear disaster, like 30 hours after it happened. But he's saying, where he's at, right, in Australia, they have an hour a day where they can be outside exercising or biking, and there's only a certain distance that he can go from his house. So it's like, whoa. So we see these progressive measures being put in place, all kinds of different levels of government, and now we're seeing additional things put in place through retail. For example, we just said in Walmart, we're starting to see visually, observing, as Joe did, fortifications of power grids, other municipal areas, things like that. So water sources. I'm just like, wow. And we are really, really close to something substantial happening. And I think this failure to regress to the mean, in the next week, we're either going to be sharply moved back to a mean through a highly kind of violent, few days, or else we are going to, I guess, enter a almost a warring, degraded state of government, and almost like a soft civil war, or a metro civil war. I don't know, and how long that would continue. But yeah, so this whole, I didn't know what to call this, right? This failure to regress to the mean. I had no idea. So, and that was a blank spot, and I'm thinking, what is that? There's also this thing called Black Swan event. I want to talk about that for just a second. So, Sir Baden, Sir Brian Bowden. Okay, so what Bacon wrote, it ain't going back. Don't know about your area, but got attacked a few weeks ago. Yeah, I saw that Bacon. Yeah, that Bacon was attacked. And first of all, I mean, and Bacon is a pretty big guy, right? And fit. So that's one of the things is that when you walk somewhere, always present like where you're going and be fit and things like that. And that was one of the key pieces of advice and decreasing the likelihood that you'd be the recipient of a attack. And for anybody, and I know Bacon, to be aggressive toward him, I mean, really shows that people are going to take things to extremes. And yeah, it is. And it's this whole thing. And I talked about this with Aaron in chat. I said, there's a lot of people I just think that they don't perceive they have anything to lose, much to lose, right? They don't have savings in the bank. They're just not happy, with they've lost agency and purpose. And they're just like, well, what's the worst that can happen, right? It seems like everyone is getting turned back onto the streets, and there is this thing too of like being part of a crowd or part of an event is energizing to some people. That's why they drive to these things from out of the area. So yeah, so we get again this whole failure to regress to the mean is happening right now, and we've got cross streams, finite voltage, crowd and behavior. So it's super volatile time. Like it would take very little to result in a very substantial, just tumbling of dominoes of these big cities, especially having significant imploding. Like I have friends who are over the road drivers, and they said, Dave, right now we get bonuses if we go to the cities, right? We get bonuses because it's dangerous. And I have one, and he's one phrase like, I won't take my own vehicle at any time, into these, but yeah, will I deliver for somebody else? For a while he would, now he won't do it. He said, I absolutely won't do it because, right, you get stopped in a protest or stopped. I mean, they're going to not only go for the cargo, but go for you. So he's like, I'm not doing it. So at what point also do we stop restocking these areas? Because no one is willing to go in and to bring supplies. So then how do supplies get to your population dense areas if they have to come in smaller deliveries? Or, I mean, is it crazy where it would be airdropped? I mean, all of this stuff is like so close to becoming an observed set of events. Like we will see this happen. And I'm sitting here, it's the 29th of October. I'm like, we are less than a week away from this. I had made a prediction that the state capitol in Madison, Wisconsin would burn the week of the election. And I'm not doing that to be dark or to be a fearmonger, but I looked at the attacks in Madison, one on a legislator who was near the Capitol. 2 people hospitalized him. I know the proximity of the Capitol to where the riots and looting and vandalism occurred. I completely see it as what would be a target to make a statement after the election, right? And I've been telling people, I said, I believe that this will be a site that will immediately be targeted. And I wouldn't be surprised if that happens in other places. And really, I mean, which sites will be protected, which will be sacrificed. And I think those decisions have already been made. But those things are, I mean, again, a failure to regress to the mean. It was only, God, when I was growing up, you'd have a presidential election and the next day, okay, it's Reagan and now, or, it's Bush or whatever it is. And it was a headline and then it was kind of gone. And, now this is basically almost a declaration of war for people who feel that this is infringing or whatever their interpretation of democracy is, or their agenda or something like that. But let me go over to the chat. So Brian wrote that buy a generator, no matter how big or small. Also learn to hunt for food. Yeah, and get batteries while you can. Rogue Prepared, Morgan Rogue has a terrific website, many shows, many blog posts on preparedness. Even if you're kind of late to the game, like, okay, tomorrow's the 30th and we have an election, on the 3rd of November. What can you do right now? And then Brian also wrote, let's see here, as Mictobus, Agenda 2030, previously known as Agenda 21. If I'm correct on that, Mictobus, that's an agenda of like a one world government, or a one government for the world, something to that effect. So yeah, I think obviously this is what's happening is it's global, right? So we have to look at today what's happening in Paris. That Paris has the confinement of, I don't know, what is it, 2-3 weeks where you can't leave the city. So after 9 p.m. So people right now who are in the city are in this confinement time frame. So it's basically the entire city is basically locked down, and there were hundreds of thousands of people trying to get out of the city before 9 p.m. before they got to this confinement. And this stuff is just crazy to think about. And the other side is like, where is the scientific model? We don't have, again, this failure to regress to the mean. All this stuff is happening. We don't have a clear understanding provided by scientists, whatever, saying, well, this is how long coronavirus or COVID-19 stays in the air, right? So that's one of the weird things. Like traveling on a plane was deemed safe if you wear a mask, but then wouldn't it be safe to do other things, with a mask in close proximity? I mean, it's so weird, the whole pick and choose type of what's permitted and what's not, right? But it's pretty, it's the lack of understanding on this. For example, again, I'm teaching these superintendents, and I can go from superintendent to superintendent. These are good folks, right? But they're not doctors. Their schools aren't being informed by medical professionals. They have some county medical advisor who initially was kind of all over this and dictating things to schools, and there was a lot of backlash, and now they've either backed totally out of the equation. And the soups will tell me that I'm not getting any help from the county, David. They're not doing anything. They're saying, make your own decisions. But yeah, it is really, really scary. Because, well, how long does, whatever, this stay in the air? And then what filtration system takes it out? And I still see people with, homemade mask. But the fact is, I can't go in today and type in and learn how long COVID stays on $1 or on a quarter or in the air or, inside of a bus or transit after somebody gets in and out, or these types of things, or if it's outdoors, what this whole, the whole thing, right, of 6 foot, like that's arbitrary, right? That's not any social distancing of 6 feet away. That's the same as after 9/11 with airplanes, when they said, yeah, you can't have more than 30 milliliters of shampoo or toothpaste in a clear container. It's an arbitrary number. So we have all of these decisions being made on very right inconsistent science. There's not even again, I would ask, soup one, tell me, how long does this stay in the air in a classroom or in your, whatever? They don't know. And that's not their fault. I don't expect them to know. And it's just crazy. So let me go back. Mictobus, Joe was retweeting NGA maps of DC earlier. Expect martial law after the election. Um, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm saying I'm agreeing to that. This whole failure to regress to the mean, failure to regress to the mean, regressing to the mean would mean that people would be following the laws, basically, right? They would not be rioting and looting, and that we wouldn't have people being surrounded in their cars and being beaten and things like that. So this is further and further this failure to regress to the mean. And I think as I guess Mictobus had said, with Joe Dolio retweeting the maps of DC and this whole primer for martial law. I don't think we would have seen this overt stuff with Walmart happen unless we were very close to like a martial law state. Forget it. For those of you who don't know, Walmart has removed all weapons and ammunition from its stores here in the last, I think, 24 to 48 hours. And the statement is they anticipate a likelihood of looting of their stores, did not want weapons and ammo to get into the hands of looters. So that's the statement. It's not, that whatever, COVID, related, we're trying to prioritize our it's saying, hey folks, like in my Walmart where I live, that is a half mile from me, was one of the stores. Well, I mean, obviously it was all the stores were affected. Not every Walmart store said about half of them carried firearms and ammo. Mine did. I'm in Wisconsin. This is a hunting area. It's hunting season right now. So yeah, the stuff is gone. So the message that sends, and again, how that was done, meaning that was done, as Joe had indicated, in plain sight. This isn't a midnight thing at Walmart. I used to work retail. I worked at kind of like a home supply. I'm not going to give the name of it. Back when I was in college, it's a big retailer, and I worked in plumbing. Like that was so. And one of the things was you never had an empty area on your shelf, right? And you never had an empty end cap because people or companies were paying thousands of dollars for this 2 square foot place on a shelf. Like that was so competitive. You can go back, and I have this in the velocity of information, just how coveted it was to get a spot on a Walmart shelf. Like just to have some retail space and a physical Walmart building, the competition for that was through the roof. Right. And that's how Walmart would leverage it with their suppliers, that they would get them to lower the price because, hey, well, you're going to be in the biggest retailer in the world. And now at my Walmart, there have been end caps that have been empty, completely empty for at least 2 months, and many areas on shelves just completely empty. And I would say, based upon a year ago, the store is probably at 40 to 50% less stock than what it was a year ago. So, you kind of get conditioned to that a little bit because they're not filling the end caps up. So again, in retail, so Roger was our store manager, and he would come around the store after hours and leave notes of things that you had to address as a department. We call them Roger notes. But he always had a section of saying, hey, like there's an unfaced area. And facing just means, like, let's say you have 3 soup cans and somebody buys the first 2, you'd bring the last one up so it looks like the shelf is full. So of course in plumbing, you'd have, different plumbing components and stuff like that. And you'd have to do facing. Or if something did open up, like there was something that did sell out, you would move other product there. Or if you didn't have product to move there, you had signage that you could move there. And there was just standard signage, like, hey, like Walmart could put on these end caps of something of saying, hey, consider a Walmart, credit card, or, hey, here's, We also have stuff online. I mean, there could be stuff easily made, right? That would just go onto these end caps, which would be signage, or even some reminder of store hours or reminder of like deli stuff, whatever it was, but it's not there. And to me, that's really telling, because the message that that is delivering is we want you to start to get this normalcy bias that when you come to Walmart, yeah, but you're going to have end caps, which will be empty. You're going to have places on shelves that won't have product. And it's just in retail, that's completely unacceptable, right? It's completely unacceptable to have bare space. Even if you don't have product, you convert that space into advertising to try to, yeah, but it would, so to see this is really alarming, to me, because I'm like, they know, like, again, and I have friends and that work in retail and other things and higher up, and they, their projections, they were telling me a lot of the stuff they anticipated with COVID, like, back in February, like, if this starts to play out, here's how the next like 12 weeks will be for us, Dave. So I think they're seeing, they realize, they understand their supply chains. They also understand that they're going to, they probably don't want a lot of stuff in their buildings because they know they're not going to be able to secure them right now or to secure their vehicles. I mean, is it going to be vigilante, approach to every vehicle that comes down the road that has Walmart on the side of it, stop it and take everything out of it because, we're going to get back from society, or people are going to take it and loot it and put it on a secondary market. I don't know. I mean, I also noticed we had an Amazon van in our neighborhood yesterday, and I'd never seen an Amazon van like that looked as much as a typical van as this one. Very small Amazon logo. Might have been like a dark kind of blue black type van. So it was one of those things, like, if I wouldn't have paid attention that much, I'd be like, okay, van, maybe, work van, utility van, whatever. But remember, like, a Walmart van or a Amazon van, big logo on it, Amazon, and all of that stuff. And I think now these, these businesses are looking and saying, like, we want to be more low key with this stuff. So let me go over here. Cameron Sanchez, evening, Doc. Evening, Cameron. Thanks for coming over, being part of the Safety Doc podcast. Brian indicates a bike generator hooks to my tires. Yeah. I actually had something kind of like that years ago, and I sold it to somebody. I just wasn't using it. But I do have wood heat here, and it does work without electricity to circulate and to maintain a temperature in the house. And I have 10 cords of wood, 2 on the way. So thankfully, I do have enough. It's only been in the 30s here. Should be in the 50s this time of year, but it's been really cold. So yeah, Bacon wrote, still on the fence about going to Seattle the day of. Might get stuck there. Yeah. Wow. Can you just imagine what Seattle's going to be like? Bacon wrote, even the outside businesses are requiring masks, even with plexiglass up. Yeah. And that was something I was, I'm observing, more, right? Is people would be outside, back a couple of months ago. And if they went in there was, into a restaurant or anything, then they would put a mask on, or if they had to do some shopping. And now you're starting to see this outside. And it was really also an observation yesterday, just how ingrained this behavior is. As I was out with, with a few people, I'm just seeing this happen. But so Bacon also wrote, I was well trained for this kind of thing, not worried about my safety, but Doc and Dolio pointed out something I didn't think of: martial law. Last place I want to be stuck is here. So yeah. And again, I don't think we're far from a declaration of martial law, because I again anticipate things will become very, very violent, right? I don't think anyone anticipates that that's not going to happen. I mean, it might almost be a self-fulfilling prophecy at this point, where people are going to, be violent. I mean, look at, the continued violence going on in Philadelphia right now, for example. I mean, look over in Paris. I mean, how absolutely crazy things have gotten there just in the last 24 hours. So, yeah, and we're hitting this time of year too, where, I mean, things are getting colder across a lot of the country. People are having to stay in more. It's really a powder keg environment. So Mictobus wrote, 100%. My worry is the tendency of these people to mob you. I know you can handle one-on-one, even 1-on-10, 1-on-20 is pushing it. Yeah. So, and that's the thing. That's what I got out of Concrete Jungle. Again, this and the new one, Prairie Fire, which I have ordered. So we'll see if it gets delivered or if that gets ripped off of a truck or whatever. But Clay Martin, his Concrete Jungle, Clay, former military, had served in 2 branches, but just the common sense approach, from Clay, of saying, if you can avoid these situations at all cost, do it. And again, not putting signage out there, not putting your affiliation, stuff like that, keeping very low key. But there is some reality that this stuff could come to you, right? I asked my superintendents in the class, I said, what would you do if, you had a van of athletes that were participating in a meet, some tournament somewhere, right? A lot of that's still going on, even if schools are virtual right now. And on their way back, they get caught in the middle of a protest. And so the van is now it can't be moved. It's in this protest, it has vehicles in front of it and back of it. There's nowhere it can go. And suddenly, people are starting to become violent and smash out windows of cars ahead of you. What are you telling your driver? What are you telling your coaches? What would be the response to the kids? I mean, we do active shooter drills, right? Those are all the time. So it's a second. Hydration. So schools do active shooter drills. I mean, all the time, right? So that's, they go really dramatic with that. But I mean, should you be doing a drill now? Should you be doing an exercise, a tabletop, or having some discussion with your drivers or your bus drivers of what happens, if one of these gets surrounded? And as Joe Dolio points out, very keenly, this can happen anywhere. And of course, this can be communicated by social media. This is where we're going to do it. But something can happen, or something can be brought to you. When I was a school administrator, I would, we had one school that was kind of rural, and people said, well, nothing will happen out here. And I said, the thing is, you might be right on that, as far as organically, something might not happen here as likely as in the city. But here's the part that you're missing. Anything can be brought to you, right? There could be a high-speed chase, and it could end up right in your front lawn. We had that happen in a school district about 30 miles from me, where there was a high-speed chase, and literally the vehicle crashed into this school. So I said, you can't have this, approach that it's not going to happen to you. You've got to be ready that it can be brought to you. I mean, people are, it's not like people don't have cars and mobility and things like that. If things continue to escalate, that they can't take, what was a mob in an urban area and move it to a suburban or even to a rural area. And especially, we haven't seen a desperation point yet. We haven't seen where there are empty stores in the urban areas and people are getting hungry. And now, instead of, coming out to loot and to steal clothing and TVs, they're coming out to steal food, right? I mean, and that, I think, increases level of anger and desperation, and just what people are willing to do, who already weren't following our social contract, and we weren't regressing to the mean. So I think it's a point of being extremely aware of what is happening around you. I will 100% limit my travel in the next week. There is no way I will be traveling on election day. It's just unconscionable to do that, because I'm not going to put myself in a situation where so many of the variables around me are going to be just on fire at that point. I'm not going to be able to control that. And yeah, I think as Mictabus pointed out, I mean, you can be, you can follow all of the rules and everything like that. And, what does it take then for a, your vehicle to be surrounded, people to come into your neighborhood to start breaking windows and things like that? You need to be really aware. And yeah, I would completely just tell anybody to not drive into a metro area, and obviously to not do anything at night into those areas. But let me go through just here in the chat one more time. So Brian wrote, the first thing to do in time of unrest is to shut down the internet. So yeah, I mean, right, if we were in martial law, I mean, there could be a throttling of the internet. There could be messages that would be coming up on our screens periodically of saying, like, here's what you have to do. You have to stay in your house. You have to do these things. I mean, our systems, the internet, television, radio, all of that. It's the emergency broadcast system has access to all of that. So remember the Hawaii missile crisis? What was it in 2017 when they said inbound missile and it wasn't accurate, but everybody's phone buzzed and it was coming across everybody's different media streams. That type of stuff is obviously being primed right now, ready to go. And people, to stay in your house, that, there would be, throttling of internet. It would be prioritized for government use, or, who knows? I think electricity is going to be pretty dicey. Brian or Bacon wrote, am I on Nick August Apocalypse bingo show? I am. I'm part of the Collapsitarian Olympics on November 3rd. So yeah, I agreed to that a few months ago. So I look forward to it. So yeah, on Tuesday night, I'll be on Nick August's show with quite a few other people. And we're just going to be doing kind of live updates from our locations and giving commentary on what we see happening on election night. I would anticipate, that will be the kickoff, right, of substantial riots, looting and violence, things until election. I think until the polls close, will be pretty regulated. I think after the polls close, especially when the first results start coming in, the night will quickly deteriorate. My thought too is I think there'll be a delay on announcing election results, kind of like when Gore, was running for president, and then it was the hanging Chads thing. And I think that would be intentional, right? To give a few days to try to, I guess, brace for the impact or to spread out the impact. I just don't. There's a couple states that have gone and said they will count ballots, mail-in ballots received up to, like, I don't know, a week after. So we're probably looking at an early projection, right? Within 24 hours, and then a more definite projection, maybe 7 days out. And then who knows? I mean, is there going to be this whole movement from one side or the other to say we're not going to accept the results? And then what happens? And I can only imagine. And the thing is, like, again, we are so close to this. It feels it feels like people should be more anxious and more, I guess, observing of what's happening. Like Joe's saying, my God, like Walmart's have said they're taking all of their guns and ammo out of the stores in the next 48 hours. And they're doing it like right now. And so what does that tell us? Like we should be tuning into that. And just so many people aren't. They're like, oh, there'll be election next week. And a lot of people have voted. So I'm like, oh, but that's not the thing, right? It's whatever happens, there's going to be this massive response. So Mictobus put, states are allowing mail-in ballot counting up to 10 days. Okay, I didn't know it was 10. So yeah. So, now it brings us to, middle of November, and realistically probably not till end of November until there would be some definite, statement or coming out if it goes to the courts or whatever, what's challenged. I mean, there's massive legal teams, on both sides. I would say probably stronger on the side of the Democrats of putting in place these challenges. And as those exist, I mean, every single day will be wild. Every single night will be rioting and looting in these, especially in the metro areas. And the longer that goes on, this failure to regress to the mean, it really is going to thin out supply chains, and that is only going to fuel people to go further and further out in the suburbs and into rural areas to get whatever they can, breaking into houses, breaking into vehicles. And the thing is, like, who's going to stop them outside of individuals, right? Law enforcement is already indicating there's certain things that they will enforce and other areas that they won't enforce. We saw that in Minneapolis, Philadelphia, saw in Kenosha, Wisconsin. So yeah, it is a matter of if you're in an area that is further, far enough rural that you're not going to be directly impacted, but you're going to, have secondary impacts of your supply chain. And, everything from your whatever Amazon deliveries to mail to payments to being able, your banks. Are we going to see banks, limit access because people are going to just, target banks as robbery, right? Like, I mean, if people don't have resources, they're going to start to go that way. So are banks going to say, out of safety for our employees and whatever, we are limiting our hours to whatever, and then also not having currency on site, saying something like, hey, you can come to the bank, but you can withdraw a total of $100 or $200 a day, and that's it, and everything else has to be electronic transaction. I mean, this could also move us failure to regress to the mean. The mean could mean we don't have currency anymore. I know Nick August on his show tonight had a guest who is an expert on cryptocurrency, and Bitcoin and the like. Maybe this is the way things are going, because there could be this whole other side. Like, who would think Walmart would take guns off the shelf because people could come into the stores and loot? Maybe banks are going to say, we're not going to do currency because we don't want people coming in and robbing and killing our tellers and stuff. So we are on board with going to digital. I mean, maybe that's going to be 30 days from now, something that's made a few headlines, and we'll be talking about it. So I think this whole failure to regress to the mean is and it's so unsettling for people because they want to get back into something that seems kind of normal. Like to not have, even like little league baseball games and just stuff like that. I mean, the time I felt kind of able to do my own thing and free was like when I was doing bike rides. This summer, I'd go out and do like a day bike ride. And even then, I'd come home and you wonder if something had changed. There'd been some new proclamation and you couldn't go out as far or something like that. But I mean, right now, I wouldn't feel comfortable traveling, more than maybe 30 minutes away from my house, and especially where I had options to get back. I'm not going to be traveling on an interstate to a metro area. It just would be completely irresponsible to do that right now. So going back to the chat. So yeah, Mictobus said, it's okay. We're used to it. They're still contesting, battling the 2016 election. Yeah. And what does this mean for elections just going forward and things like this? I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I missed the days of growing up and an election happened, and the next day you had a new president and life kind of moved on. Brian, or president was reelected, whatever. Brian wrote, "I'm sorry, but like taxes, if you don't have your mail-in ballot postmarked by election day, then it should not count." Yeah, and I'm with you, Brian. I don't get this whole thing of like, what, it's everybody knows when there's an election, things like that. Why is there this delay on this? And I guess right. The argument is some states say we open our ballots on election night or whatever at 8:00, so all the ballots are received, but we don't open them until then. So we have this whole process, I guess, where they have to go through and open them and things like that. But still, like you would think, right, that that logically you should just be able to get the stuff in ahead of time and staff for that. And if anything, maybe like there's an additional, 48 hours to process something like that. But I mean, because what's going to happen, right, Brian? What's going to happen is you'll have a state that'll say, well, instead of 10 days, now we're in the process of processing these, and we don't have enough, people, and now there's, there'll be additional, what is it? In Texas, they've had additional lockdowns with coronavirus and things like that. And so they'll just say, we don't have enough staff to count the ballots. So now, or enough people. So now we have to push this out even further. So I think you'll have some states where this 10 days we'll be hearing it's now going to be, it'll be 2 weeks or something like that because of, or they'll say, oh, there was a polling place, right? Or polling centers and people were COVID positive. So now like we've just wiped out a whole group of people who could count things. I mean, what if somebody contests and says, ballots themselves have to be quarantined? Okay, this was a positive site. So we have to take the ballots and hold them for 10 days to make sure that any virus on them has died. So I don't think these things are that far out of the realm of having somebody propose these. Right. I mean, and then you'd have to have a challenge against it, and it would eat up time, right? It would eat up time. And so I wouldn't put these out of the realm of possibility in a time when we failed to regress to the mean, and every day seems to be getting more unusual than what we've known, I guess, for most of our lives prior to March. So yeah, Bacon wrote, how is that constitutional? Sast wrote, it's not. Yeah, it's not. But again, I mean, I think I would expect things like that would happen. Bacon wrote, the podcast actually had the marketing department of my domain host call me yesterday. They're 2 hours south of London. Even they're watching to see how crazy this will get. Are you serious? Holy smokes. So Bacon, the marketing department of his domain host called him. Wow. That's crazy. Yeah. And then Mictbis said, cheating is the end goal. We saw it in 2018, states waiting until last minute to report the results and then going to 100% of the population voting, right, for the preferred candidate. And there's also this overlying piece, right? It's funding. It's the CARES Act too. So I think if you have further collapse of your metro areas, which, the majority of your metro areas being Democratic, that is also going to prompt, if there is a Democratic victory or Democratic Senate, a passing of a more substantial CARES 2 stimulus bill, stimulus with a smile, right? Because it just adds trillions into a deficit that is out of control. And, at some point, interest rates are going to have to go up, just for the fact that either the value of the U.S. currency will be recognized as being less. I mean, we're still the biggest kid on the block right now, but yeah, I mean, so in some of these communities, I mean, the more unrest and collapse they have could equate to a stronger stimulus package for them. So it's just one of those things. I mean, it has been very unclear what's going to come out for municipalities. And of course, I mean, municipalities are going to jump on this and say, well, we need money. And pretty soon it'll be because like our retirement accounts for our public employees haven't been fully funded, so we need to make that whole. And I mean, they'll go through all these things that have nothing to do with coronavirus or what's happened since March, and try to fix it in one fell swoop. And not that they would really fix it, but at least try, try to remedy these issues which they have brought upon themselves, and use this as an excuse to do it. And I mean, yeah, and we're trillions of dollars, right? Trillions and trillions in debt. And at what point, too, this failure to regress to the mean of having some interest rates that would make sense, not 1% on a 5-year CD, but, like at least 5% or something like that. Our banking, when does that start to actually kind of look more like the mean, more like it should? Because if you get to a point, right, if you get to a point where you can just continually print money, which is, basically what the US does. I mean, the money's just, there's nothing backing, right? It's just a trust of people. Once you get a certain point in that, what's the difference between 25 trillion and 100 trillion? I mean, you're starting to talk in fantasy numbers that people know you're not going to pay back. And so what are they going to do? Unless they really have the economic power to take you on, they're just going to have to go with it until there'd be, like some global depression or, whatever. It's not going to be, the US wouldn't be Venezuela, unless, like China or somebody else take over. But but that thing basically means like you could create all these bills and give people money and give these local governments money and these metros money, and they could just go wild, with it and just spending it into all of these programs. Again, it's far away from what we should have, right? Which would be like maybe a national infrastructure bill, bridges, highways, things like that, tangible versus, putting money into programs, bills. But I don't know. So yeah, Microbus put states need to fund their own budgets. Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. And I did a couple podcasts right back in March, April, and I was projecting what this would mean for schools and school safety. If there would be this austerity that would come across schools, they would be told by their states, you need to cut 20%, 30% or more. And I'm not seeing it at all. Like, so yeah, there has been a decrease in funding, but a lot of districts, especially districts close to where I'm at, and they've lost 5% of their student base, things like that. And they still have the same staffing. They still have the same number of aides. They're still paying bus drivers. It is just, and you can read these articles over and over again. These austerity measures just aren't happening. And yeah, the universities saying, well, we're putting, people on furlough, so they'll have 3 or 5 days they won't get paid. Well, I get that, but it should be more substantial than that. It should, across the board with government, we should see austerity measures right now. And we don't see, I'm saying, especially these cities, in counties and metro areas, we don't see these austerity measures. It's insane, in response to what has happened since March. So it's very frustrating for me because I think I was right on with that show. I think the show made a lot of sense, but then it never happened. And I'm like, people just aren't willing to feel the tightening of the belt, right? It's a discomfort to them. So they're just holding out and saying, we'll just keep everybody on contract. Even though, right, we don't have the kids on the building, but we'll keep the aides here, or we'll keep running bus routes. One of the schools did that. It wasn't in Wisconsin, but I think I retweeted the article. And the reason the district administrator said, well, we're keeping our bus drivers on staff, right? We're paying them, and we're running the bus routes every day, even though we're not picking kids up, because we want the bus drivers to be sharp, to have their skills sharpened when we do go back to in-person classes. And that's just the biggest lie, right? It's just garbage. And the reason they did it, the reason that they kept, these bus drivers on is they one, if they get rid of the drivers, right, it's hard to find bus drivers and you have to go through the pain of hiring. But the other one is, if you decrease your spending as a district, there's something called maintenance of effort, basically. And it's better for your state funding if you spend the same amount you spent in the year prior or more. So to show that restraint as a district, to do a reduction in force, and to sit down with your different, if you have a union bargaining group or other groups like, your custodians, your teachers, your administrators and stuff like that, and to really put into place some, reductions, austerity reductions, it just doesn't happen. And it's different. 15, again, this is a regression from the mean we've seen again in the way that public entities are managed. Public public workers in, again, metro areas, which have lost millions and millions of dollars in revenue due to taxation, or due to not having sports, professional sports being able to be played and things like that. And they're not laying off people, and they're not reducing hours and stuff like that. So it's frustrating, because I did that podcast. I'm like, that is exactly how it would have played out 20 years ago or more. There would have been that response. So maybe I'm old school. Like, I went back and I listened to that. I'm like, I think I'm like old time. Like, this just isn't the world we live in anymore, that when hard times hit, that you have to tighten the belt of government spending at a state and local level. And it's just not happening. It just is not. And the thing is, because I think there's this thought of, well, we'll just get this bill passed, and this additional funding and everything will just be made whole instead of this austerity. It's frustrating. I think it's wrong. It appalls me that that's the way things have gone. Looking over in the comments per previous stream, it's possible we go to universal cashless digital currency from SAST. So yeah, I saw, well, again, my local Walmart, other stores, signs that said cash only. Joe Dolio sent me some that he saw a few months ago. So those are in my book of, the velocity of information, things that we have to process, cashless transactions, stuff like that, just being the norm. And we haven't got, hey, Woke Shui, what's up, Doc? Just got in. Welcome, buddy. Woke Shui. And people, again, are getting conditioned to this. It's normalcy bias, where, okay, the first time you go to the store and it says, credit only, right? You're like, okay, whatever. And you think it's maybe short term. It was a coin shortage, right? That was the argument. Now, the other argument is of course, coronavirus. We want to limit you handing somebody paper currency or coins or stuff like that. Which actually, if I were to script this, if I were to be in charge of the argument to get rid of money, the spin doctor on this, I would come at it really strong from that angle. Like, I would say it has to be done as a way to decrease transmission. I'm not saying that's what I believe, right? The science. I'm just saying, though, I would have hit that really hard as a spin doctor. Maybe we were in for that, of just having, 10 of the biggest nations come out and say, in their banking and whatever, and say, we are transitioning to cashless, and you will have, so many days to redeem any paper or coin currency that you have. And after that, it's just basically going to be like collector stuff. I've talked to somebody who believes that is a very plausible scenario. And then you basically would be working off of a credit card, or, and that would rocket cryptocurrency, up also. But it's, how far away are we from that? I would say it's a very plausible scenario. You could also argue interruptions, with the mint. We don't have we can't get the raw materials, or we don't have the workers. It's costing more to make a penny or a nickel than it actually, whatever. But if there is a time, right, if there is a time for a government or governments to make a push for a cashless society, which means every transaction everybody makes is not only monitored, but you can have your stuff limited, right? If you're in China with social credit score, which has been there since what, 3 years ago, there are places you can have money in your account, but if your social credit score isn't at whatever, the place won't accept your money. So you go in with your credit card or whatever, you're trying to get a plane ticket or a train ticket, and they'll say no. It comes up as you've been flagged with social credit. You can get a bus pass, but you can't get a train pass. So when I saw the social credit score going in in China 3 years ago, I watched it and thought, we're not far off from that happening somewhere else. I don't know, where, could it, Japan probably wouldn't need it. But maybe, like Australia, right? France. I guess now maybe you could even see England going that route. I don't think we're far off from a social credit score. And you would get things for social credit score, like for wearing your mask, right? Or if you allowed your phone to be allowed it to be traced, like all of our systems are already traced, right? But if you permitted that, so then with the whole thing of like, well, then it contributes to informing the database about contact tracing of where you've been, other people have been. We'll have a much more robust system to get information out to people. This is just the argument, right? I'm not backing it. I'm just trying to lay out how I think this argument could be presented in a way where a majority of people would probably go with it, right? Because again, let's just bring up this image. Let's just bring up this image. So this is Velocity of Information, my second book, and people want to get back to what they over here on the left remember is Utopia before March. So if we look at this, we're over here present day on the right, and we have this failure to regress to the mean. We've hit finite voltage at 90 days, meaning a lot of people have just burned out. They've become very impatient. They're very depressed. They're unsatisfied with life. They would give part of the social contract, right? Social contract is, I'll give these my rights to the government in order for the government to protect me, right? Quote unquote. After 9/11, there was a big exchange of the social contract, people saying, I'll let you be more invasive with monitoring my finances, monitoring, my phone and email, my air travel, stuff like that, because you're going to keep terrorists out of the country. So that was the trade-off, right, of a social contract with the Patriot Act. So right over here, failure to regress, where we're at now, this is very unsettling for people. People want to get back to what they perceive as some torus or self-similarity. They want to get back to what they think things were like back in February. They remember that as being Utopia. So if you present people with this trade-off, right? If you're saying, hey, here's the deal, like get rid of cash and let us track everything, right? So I mean, those would be, two of the things. Also, everybody has to take the vaccine, and if you don't take a vaccine, it will count against your social credit score, or there'll be some score that will count on, or it could count against your FICA score, right? Because people would say there's a greater risk to lend money or whatever to give credit to someone that hasn't been vaccinated, because they could be put into a quarantine and not be able to earn income. I mean, these arguments could be made. And you're listening to this show, Bull Rush, Mictobis, Sast, Juan, Brian. I mean, for you, all of this makes sense, right? That's I appreciate everybody in the chat, Sast, because you're intellectual. This makes sense to you, like you see this, but we are not the majority in this. The majority of people will surrender rights, will do what they are told, right? They will follow these directives. I mean, it's like Paris again today, going into this 2-week confinement. You can't get in and out of the city. People will surrender these things, and once you get a majority to do it, it is again, then it either becomes almost this Civil War II, which Clay writes about in Prairie Fire, Clay Martin, or what happens, or the rest of us. I mean, so if they take away currency, paper currency and coin, I mean, what do we go to? I mean, obviously people say like gold and silver and crypto and things like that. Okay, yes, but I mean, like, if you have paper currency, it's not like you could hold that back and say, well, I'm not going to give in my paper currency, because it could just be in a on July 1st, if it hasn't been redeemed, it won't be accepted anywhere. So, I mean, that is a very plausible scenario, especially if you put it out there. And I mean, you could layer this so many ways, right? If I had a day, if the government sat down with me and had a day, and I wouldn't do this, right? But I always said the Hawaii missile crisis, I could have come up with the best cover story for that. No one would have questioned it. It would have been completely awesome. But anyway, I could sit down and say, here's the story. Here's how to spin it. You could do it from a point of saying it's not cost effective to do the currency. It's the virus is on the paper and coin currency. That our ability. So those would be two of the things. International transfers of currency would be much more rapid without this. We'd be more efficient in things like drive-throughs and retail, and that we would save time and whatever. I mean, you could come up with all this, and you could also say, like, we can track currency better, because for Patriot Act, to know where currency is coming in and out of it's not, what is it like when the U.S. deals overseas, like in a lot of the dealings, it has to be all like paper money, right? It's $100 bills and 20s and big crates, big pallets. So it's not trackable, right? But I don't know. So I think this whole thing is people are going to be willing to give up a lot for what they perceive is a return to the mean. And once you give it up, right, you never get it back. You absolutely never get it back. Bullrush put took you long enough. Cashless society is the end game. Monitor these nuts. Oh man, I walked right into that. Come on, Bullrush. So wow. Yeah, SAS, but I posted an article that was 100% relevant to that, but I don't have the wrench. How do I give the wrench? Somebody write that. I'm willing. I can do that here. How the hell do I do that? All right. Because I'm in StreamYard. Am I able to give the wrench through StreamYard? How does this? Anybody know? Can you post? How do I give the wrench? Okay, so I'm watching. How do I give the wrench? So, all right. So, all right, a black swan event. So what is a black swan event? Just kind of real quick here. What I must do it on YouTube. So, 3 dots to the right of the chat in YouTube. Okay, but just hang with me. Let me get over here into YouTube and okay. All right. So I'm going to log in. All right. Somebody subscribe. Thank you very much for doing that. Good. Okay. So let me get in and okay. So you said the 3 dots. Okay. So it says, manage moderators. All right. Okay. So walk me through this a second. Manage moderators. Add moderator, right? So how do I? How the hell do I do that? It has to be done on YouTube. So I've got it. So Wookie, can you guys like help me on this? So I can actually show you. Yeah, I can. Let me show you what I've got. Just a second. Okay, so take a look. That's what's happening. So, okay, add it in the live chat. So let me get over here to what the hell is going on? Okay, so live chat. So yeah, I've got the 3, and it says manage, moderate, and manage moderators, participants. So, okay, so I see you guys as participants, and you can add 2 dots to the right of the message I post. Okay. All right, let me get in there. 2 dots to the. So I see the message you post. I see 3 dots next to the message you post. And add moderator. Okay, so Sast, you are now a moderator. Actually, let me just clean this up for you other guys so I can put you in. So is that what it's doing? I need to add you as a moderator so you can, that gives you the wrench. So, all right. So just let me clean it up here a little bit. Everybody's a moderator. Look at this. All you guys are cool. Some channels I'd have to limit. So that means you guys can go in and lay down the hammer here if somebody goes absolutely nuts. So yeah, I think I've got everybody who should be a monitor. Good. Okay. Coolio. All right. So yeah, post away. So great, guys. Cameron. All right. Cameron, did I give you the moderating thing here? Just wait a second, buddy. All right, Cameron, look at that. You are now moderator. You're like, how the hell could this day get any better? How could we get toward the mean? How could we regress to the mean, which is actually a good thing? You can be a moderator for this show. So yeah. So, we've heard things too, like a black swan event. So 9/11 was a black swan. A black swan event is something unpredictable. Nobody saw it coming, right? I mean, out of the blue. So it's kind of like a force majeure event. Very rare. It can be positive. It can be negative. Most of the times we think of them negative, like Chernobyl, 9/11 attacks. In 1859, September 2nd, there was a solar flare, huge solar flare that took out most of the telegraph equipment across the world as a black swan event. COVID-19, I guess, black swan event. So those are things like that in hindsight, people think that, oh yeah, I saw all the symptoms for that. Like I said, that was all playing out. Could have been prevented. That's just because we get more information, we start to create this whole narrative. So there's other things called narrative fallacy. So I would say, like, just look that up on your own sometime. I'll talk a little bit about it, but this is where people, and not, again, you're listening to this, you're aware of it, you're not getting sucked in and taken out by narrative fallacy, but probably a lot of people are. So narrative fallacy leads us to basically create this, in our mind, this logical chain of events of why things happen. So it's like the story of like, oh, this, like, this athlete, how they made it into the NFL and all of that stuff because they worked hard, and they had good genetics and a good high school coach and all of that. And it's like, yeah, that's part of it, right? And part of it is just like there's also 1,000 other people that had all those same variables, but this person also had luck, like they were on the right team at the right time with the right coach, and they had some connections, or they attended some combine where someone was there observing them or something, or someone got hurt ahead of them and they got some playing time. So yes, like those factors are part of it, but this whole fallacy narrative or narrative fallacy, and there were the two books that came out. I'm going to mention these because they're really God, where in okay, the two books, In Search of Excellence and the book Good to Great. So those were books that described companies that were just doing awesome, right? These companies are model companies that everybody should try to aim to be like. And the reality was, you go 5 to 10 years out, and all of the companies mentioned in those books, In Search of Excellence and Good to Great, they all regressed to the mean. They just turned back into normal companies, or they fell below the mean, and some of them even went bankrupt. None of them maintained this level. They were already above, far beyond the mean. They were unsustainable. We'll see that with Google too. There's no doubt. I mean, Google's the big player right now, but they will regress to the mean, and there will be, some new industries that will come into that, and things, new players. But it's just funny. Yeah. I was reading an article that analyzed how, we make these examples, these narratives out of things that there really isn't the narrative at all. We just create it and manifest it. So, but yeah, so a lot of people got wrenches tonight, which is an absolute great thing. Mictobus wrote, luck equals preparation plus opportunity. Right, completely. And we neglect to acknowledge the opportunity side of that. Too many people do, right? Woke Chui, a great way to put it. Yeah. SAST experience. When did we need it? Yesterday. When did we get it? Today. Yeah. So, in wrapping up, thanks for being, participating in the chat. SAST, Cameron, Woke Chewy, Mictobus, Red, Juan, appreciate it. And I'm going to, I've got some more shows ready to go. I've got Carl Hop coming on. He's going to give us some insights on how it's really hard to break a culture of how employees, when they're doing things a certain way, and then strategies that he used on that. And of course, I'm going to tell you exactly what I'm seeing and what I'm perceiving as this failure to regress to mean increases. And I wouldn't put it beyond school districts, for example, that have gone back to school to not to basically say we can't secure a school setting anymore because police are strained with these riots, and schools have already decreased their SROs, school resource officers. I can see schools saying we can't safely bus kids. Make that statement to parents saying we're not going to bus kids when the police aren't out patrolling the streets, and we have 50 kids in a bus, which can now be stopped during a protest, and we can have 5-year-olds in there. I mean, so I think you're going to see schooling grind to a halt, especially in these metro areas, and not because of the coronavirus. I think there'll be a statement of saying, one, we cannot safely believe they'll safely be guaranteed. A statement like they would say this. And the second one is that we don't believe our facilities can be kept safe because it's population dense, right? If someone was to, a riot was to somehow make its way to a school or elementary school, now suddenly you have a population dense area and you're not able to secure it. So watch for that and say, hey, Doc talked about that on October 29th, that schools were going to, maybe, or even shut down the week of the election or until, for the rest of November in some of these metro areas. And they would just say, we're doing it because, it's safety for staff and students. We don't believe public safety. It is at a level that allows us. So I mean, like what I'm talking about right now, like I could create that narrative, and really, like if you worked that narrative, as a school administrator or as a teachers union or something like that, it would be a pretty compelling narrative, right? You would have, you could point to things and say, look, like this, these areas in our town have been, substantially damaged or destroyed in vehicles but so again, I think you're going to see things change from this narrative of coronavirus, which, that was the reason Walmart decreased their hours and stuff like this and whatever. Now you're seeing this whole different narrative of behaviors that are changing. Walmart, we're getting rid of firearms and things like that, at least for the short term, in 48 hours, all of our buildings, because we believe there's a high risk of looting in our buildings. And, that we're not going to be able to secure them and police won't secure them. Well, if Walmart is saying that, right, it's not that big of a bridge to cross to have a school say that, especially with kids. And then, so do you protect your hospitals then? I mean, what's happening on the side of law enforcement and emergency management? Is it saying, we're going to set up because we also saw that hospitals, entrances to hospitals during, if an officer was shot and they were being transported to a hospital, that there were rioters dispatched to interrupt that path so they couldn't have access to hospitals. So I think this will be an interesting show to play back or to keep in your mind here in the next 7 to 21 days. So, wow. All right, everybody, I'm Dr. David Proden, the Safety Doc. It is my honor to be delivering episode 149 here of the Safety Doc podcast. Check out the other shows at safetyphd.com. Every show I've done is there, plus a blog post, which is maybe about a 3 to 5 minute read. It's very concise, where I pull in everything that I've kind of touched base on. But yeah, so we do have a number of interviews. Most of the podcasts are interviews. I would definitely recommend, some of my favorites, Brian Bowden, Larry Lawton, going back, Robert Travis, who was on the crab boats, checking some of those out. So take care, everybody. Please tell friends and family to subscribe to the Safety Doc podcast. I would love to get to 1,000 subscribers someday. I mean, I see these YouTube channels where it's like, hey, we just hit like 100,000. And if I hit 1,000, I'm going to make something for the back here, and I will put it up. There'll be some sign that says, yeah, I've hit 1,000 subscribers. So if you can make that happen, if you have friends and you say, hey, you got a YouTube channel, if you can just go in and follow the Safety Doc, I know you'd appreciate it. Anything you put in the comments, I always appreciate that. It helps the algorithm too. And this is out on audio. It will be out tomorrow. Hey, 18 thumbs up. Thank you very much. It'll be out on audio tomorrow on Podbean. So if you go to Safety PhD, it links over to Podbean. And then, you can download obviously the podcast if that's the way you want to listen. So I know our good friend Phil in Germany downloads the shows and listen to them. But again, thank you, everybody. Stay safe. This is your good friend, the Safety Doc. Good, a smiley there from SAST, Mictobis. I mean, appreciate all you guys. So take care, everybody. Oh, hey, wait a second before you leave. I got to do this. It snowed here. It snowed here last week. In 2 days, it snowed. I left for coffee in the morning. There was an inch of snow outside. That's not supposed to happen. Not yet. All right. So, all right. Take care, everybody.